So when I am called upon to say grace at meals, which has happened increasingly frequently after going to seminary, I often find myself returning to a version of grace that I learned many years ago from a fellow UU, which I realize only now kind of echoes that Buddhist prayer from Allen Ginsberg that was in our reading earlier. Something along lines of, we are grateful for the bounty of this food and for the hands that prepared it. For all the hands that planted and harvested and packaged and shipped, for the lives of the plants and animals that made the meal possible. It serves as a reminder of that web, that long thread of connection that's tied to every single item we consume and everything we touch. Not just food, too, right? The energy that burns in our light bulbs, the materials that build our homes, the clothing we wear. The question of where does this come from is one that could occupy us for 1,000 Sundays and beyond, just laying a hand on a different object every week and trying to answer that question. And I don't say this because I expect it to be shocking to anyone. We all know, on some level, that we rely on the lives and labor of others who we may never meet. But how often do we really think about this underlying fact of our lives? What emotions does it give rise to in us when we're reminded of it? When we talk as UUs about being connected to the interdependent web, there can be a comfort that comes from feeling part of something bigger, I think. But this is another side of that feeling. When the something bigger we're connected to is a global system of commerce that we didn't choose. What does it mean to be connected in this way? How do we as UUs grapple with this thing that we all know is true but rarely directly address in the context of spirituality together rather than, say, politics or economics? Perhaps there is a reason we find it easier to linger on our gratitude and relationship to the natural world, less so on our relationship to the work of our fellow humans. There is an art exhibit / clothing line called Human Touch, in which all the clothing is made using a technique the artists call paint sewing, meant to show every place the item is touched during the manufacturing process. The garment workers are given black paint to cover their hands while they work, leaving fingerprints and smudges all over the light-colored clothing. Despite all our automation, there is still no such thing as a sewing machine that runs itself. All our clothes are, to some extent, handmade. In paint sewing, as each seam is sewn, each collar and button put into place, the worker's hands leave behind evidence of having been there, having brought that final object into existence. And the clothing created by this process is striking. It ends up so speckled with fingerprints that it's hard to even discern the shape of hands. It's like an abstract pattern. And it's powerful to realize that some version of those same fingerprints are on nearly every piece of clothing I've ever worn. They just aren't visible. It feels intense somehow to feel the clothing on my body when I think about that. Look at the neat seams and the buttons and think of the hands that put them there. And that feeling, that intensity, I think deserves our collective attention, our time. Part of it is the realization that a lot of energy goes into keeping those fingerprints invisible to me, making it so I never have to think about the people on the other end of my supply chains. I never have to feel the reality of my reliance on them, that they're anonymized, far away, dehumanized. There's a risk, I think, of seeing this art or the feeling of it as being about contamination or dirtiness. It's like pristine fabric spoiled by dark fingerprints. When I first encountered this artwork, I did feel the instinctual feeling of aversion, which I think was shame, maybe. The feeling of, get it away from me. I hate thinking about how all my clothing is made this way. I don't want to be part of this unethical supply chain. And I do think part of the intent is to motivate people to consider making more of their own clothing or finding more sustainable shopping habits. But I truly don't think shame is the end point. When we can sit with it for another minute, I think there is another emotion calling to us here. The title of this art is Human Touch. When we imagine the invisible fingerprints on our own shirt cuffs and sneakers and collars, rather than pushing it away, can we hold it close? Can we see in those marks a human touch, a connection to a person, a real person just like ourselves with a life and family, thoughts, ambitions? Can we see that and want to draw closer to them, learn about them, know them? You know, this person clothed me. That's intimate. What gratitude I feel in response. How can I repay that? And this is the feeling that goes beyond guilt or shame, goes beyond the kind of distant sympathy for the poor oppressed workers as an abstract idea. This is the seed of solidarity. There's something about handprints and touch that's particularly powerful, like seeing a handprint on a cave wall that sends the message across time and space that we are the same, that if you reach out your hand, I will reach back. Our lives are already touching one another. It's the separation that is the illusion. It's pretty easy right now to feel sometimes powerless when compared to the institutions and systems we find ourselves navigating, whether it's personal challenges involving school or work or legal systems or medical systems, or just struggling to keep up with headlines where global giants seem determined to put all our lives and our planet at risk. What can any of us do? You know, to be just one person facing up against the big fish, the open ocean, it can feel impossibly overwhelming. It's vital, I think, in a service on people power, to not just express our gratitude for individuals, for the labor of others, the food, clothing, materials, energy that they make possible in our lives, but also to express gratitude for the organizers, the labor movement. The reminder that people power isn't just something that powers supply chains and economies, it's also something that fights back against dehumanizing markets and builds up foundations of rights that we can now take for granted. May Day, or May 1st, just this past Friday, has been celebrated as International Workers' Day for more than 100 years. It's a day that started with a general strike in Chicago, Illinois, demanding an 8-hour workday. The strike began on May 1st, 1886, and on May 4th, an unidentified person threw a bomb in a crowd, and police closed in on the strikers. 11 people were killed and almost 200 injured in what would later be called the Haymarket Affair. And in the following months, hundreds of American labor organizers were rounded up and 4 were executed. There have been marches and demonstrations every May 1st since the 1880s on nearly every continent after a call went out for trade unionists of all countries to demonstrate energetically on the 1st of May for the legal establishment of the 8-hour day, for the class demands of the proletariat, and for universal peace. And to be clear, while we're still waiting for universal peace, the 8-hour day did happen because of them. With constant pressure and organizing and striking and negotiating and lobbying, the original goal of that 8-hour day did make its way into legal recognition in many countries. And it wasn't quick and it wasn't easy, but each win hard fought for is proof that the little fish really can come together and have an impact on the powerful systems that seem so impossible to move. And this isn't just me saying, rah, rah, join your local union. I mean, if I were speaking to you at your workplace, that would be one thing, but I'm speaking to you here in our sanctuary, a place of spirit and story and searching for more. Because I believe that reminding ourselves of this type of collective story is one tool that we can all use to fight back against feeling powerless, feeling isolated, alienated from one another, or like nothing we do will make a dent in the world. It's so important that we remember how we got this far, not just when looking at labor law, but any hard-won progress in our world. It's so important to remember the power of people. In some other pulpit, at this very moment, some other congregation is hearing about the power of the Lord, or the power of prayer, or the power of salvation. And you might hear versions of those messages here on some other Sundays as well. But today, in this place, we remind ourselves of people power, our power. The power to reach out to one another in solidarity and genuine care. To organize, to demand in one combined voice when change is needed. Many drops of water turn a wheel, singly none. Just a couple Sundays ago, we welcomed 11 new members into our congregation, and later in today's service, we're going to be welcoming 5 more. None of us have to be little fish swimming the reef alone if we don't want to be. There's a deep power in choosing to be part of something. It's notable how many UUs I know who sign a membership book saying some version of, "I'm actually not much of a joiner." Our independent spirit can be one of our greatest strengths, it's true. And I believe we are stronger together. Together we can build new ways and do things we simply couldn't do alone. Our 6th UU principle names the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. This call to community is part of our faith. And it's a call to community that spans the globe, not bound by borders or by status. The truth is, our lives are already touching one another. The long chain of buying and selling and shipping that separates me from the person who sewed this shirt are nothing compared to her fingerprints on my cuff. The world is so small. We are all already neighbors. And what I want is for my touch on her life to be something more than just my money funding the corporations that separate us. I want to reach back and pull closer. It takes effort and change and organizing and 1,000 transformations along the way. And I know transformation starts here, and it starts with community. We are all connected, not in an abstract, symbolic way, but in our very beings, in what we eat and breathe and touch every day. It's true for the plants and animals, and it is true for us. So may we remember that fact. May we rely on one another and show up for those hoping they can rely on us. May we live in genuine mutuality, solidarity, and care. And may we give thanks every day for the bounty of this life and for the hands, the many, many hands that make it possible. Blessed be, and amen.